The whisper came just before bedtime. His small hand tugged at my sleeve, eyes wide with something heavier than fear. "Grandma," he murmured, his voice barely a breeze. "My parents are taking your money tonight." I stared down at him, heart slamming against my ribs like a warning bell. He was only 5. But I saw it in his eyes. He knew something I didn't. And in that moment, I knew I had to act, before it was too late. My name is Miriam Rose. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I've been proud to say I was a mother first, and everything else second. I was the kind of mother who packed lunches with little notes tucked inside, who sat at every school play, front row, clapping the loudest. When my son, David, lost his father at 13, I didn't crumble. I worked double shifts at the hospital, gave up vacations, refinanced the house, anything to keep him safe and dreaming. So maybe you'll understand why it broke something deep inside me when he slowly began treating me like I was in the way. Like I was an obligation instead of his mother. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't knock on your door and introduce itself. No. It creeps in through small things. It started with fewer calls. Then, missed birthdays. Then, moving my Christmas present, still unwrapped, off to the side of the living room while his wife, Leanne, paraded around in her diamond necklace from him, laughing about some spa package. I didn't say anything then. Maybe I should have. But I told myself, they're busy. They're young. They have their own family now. I told myself a lot of things. Back then, they were living in a cramped condo, barely making it on David's salary as a project manager and Leanne's part-time job at a boutique. So when David called me, voice heavy with shame, asking if I'd consider helping with a down payment on a bigger house, for the kids, for stability, I didn't hesitate. I liquidated my retirement savings, cashed out an old insurance policy, and handed him $165,000. He promised to pay me back monthly. Of course he did. I told him not to worry about it. "You're my son," I'd said. "I didn't give you that money expecting anything back. Just take care of your family." But I guess I should have made him sign something. I guess love doesn't hold up in court. The new house was beautiful. Big windows, shiny floors, a landscaped yard with a little garden patch they never used. They hosted a barbecue once, invited friends, neighbors, even Leanne's mother, who kept calling me Marilyn the entire night and laughed like it was cute when I corrected her. By the end of that evening, I realized something else. They had introduced me to everyone as David's elderly mother. Not my mom, not Miriam, not even Grandma. Just a shadow. But it was Noah, my 5-year-old grandson, who kept me tethered. He would come sit in my lap when everyone else was busy, tuck his head under my chin like he used to do as a baby. "Grandma," he whispered once, "when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a pink house." I laughed. "Why pink?" "Because you like roses. And pink is a rose color." He remembered. He noticed. Unlike his parents. One day, I brought over some old photo albums. Pictures of David as a child, his first birthday, Halloween in that ridiculous pumpkin costume. Leanne barely glanced at them. "Oh, that's cute," she muttered, scrolling through her phone. "We really should digitize all that. Old books take up so much space." Later that week, I noticed the albums were missing. I found them months later in a box in the garage, shoved under Christmas decorations. It was like erasing who we were. Still, I said nothing. I stayed quiet through Leanne's snide comments about my clothes. Through David's eye rolls when I offered to babysit. Through being seated at the end of the table, half out of the frame in family photos. But that night, when Noah whispered that warning, I felt something shift in me. It was the tone of his voice. The way he glanced toward the hallway, like someone might be listening. The way he clenched his little hands into fists. "They said you wouldn't understand," he said. "But I heard them. In the kitchen." "What did they say, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked down. That they were gonna take your money from the drawer and do something with the papers. Dad said not to feel bad because you forget things anyway. I froze. The drawer. The one in the guest room. My drawer. I stayed with them 3 nights a week to help with school runs and dinners while they juggled work. My pension check still came in by mail, and sometimes I'd keep important documents, bank letters, account numbers, even a copy of the house title, in that drawer. I hadn't told them. How did they know? That night, after Noah fell asleep, I sat in the guest room in the dark, thinking about everything. All the signs I ignored. All the chances I gave them. All the years. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was staring at the end of something. Not my life, but the version of it where I trusted them blindly. I didn't sleep. The next morning, while they were rushing around, I quietly slipped the drawer open. The bank letters were gone. So was the little notebook I kept with passwords and security questions. I walked into the kitchen where Leanne was pouring juice. "Have you seen my mail?" I asked casually. She blinked, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, you probably misplaced it, Miriam. You know these things happen." It was the way she said it. Like I was already gone. Like I was someone to be managed. David didn't even look up from his phone. I drove straight to the bank. I wasn't sure what I'd say, but the woman behind the desk, her name was Sheila, was patient. "Kind." She asked if I'd like to put alerts on my accounts, maybe consider updating beneficiaries, or even freezing certain assets temporarily, just in case. "Do you think someone might be trying to access your funds without permission?" she asked gently. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to scream it. But instead, I nodded. And that was the first time I took a step toward protecting myself. That night, I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the steam rise, thinking about every time I gave parts of myself away, to people who believed I would never stop giving. The next morning, I called an old friend from church, Marlene. Her nephew was a lawyer. I told her everything. Marlene didn't gasp or pity me. She just said one thing: "It's not too late to draw the line. Even if you should have done it years ago." So I made an appointment. A few days later, I sat in a conference room with a young attorney named Clara. She didn't treat me like a forgetful old woman. She listened. And she gave me advice that made my stomach churn, but also filled me with a strange calm. "You've given generously," she said, flipping through my documents. "Now let's make sure it's not used against you." I signed the papers she prepared. Power of attorney changes. Asset protection clauses. A private investigator recommendation, if needed. It felt like war armor. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to wear it. Because if the people you love choose to betray you, then love alone is not enough. The days that followed were quieter than usual. Not because life had suddenly slowed, but because I was learning to listen again. Not to what people said, but to what they didn't. The silences. The glances. The shrugs. That kind of quiet tells you more than words ever will. I began moving my things out of their house. Slowly, carefully, so it wouldn't raise suspicion. A few clothes. My important papers. The photo of my late husband and me from our trip to Lake Como. The one I kept tucked behind my dresser mirror. I took the albums too. Noah watched me with that same silent understanding only children seem to possess. One morning, while brushing his teeth, he looked at me through the mirror and whispered, "Are you going to be okay, Grandma?" I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart. Grandma's just taking care of some important things." He nodded, then leaned his cheek into my arm. At night, I started locking my bedroom door. It was subtle, but enough. One evening, I caught Leanne gently turning the handle, then stopping when it didn't give. She didn't say a word about it. But the next morning, she made sure to, accidentally, throw away the groceries I'd bought. "Oh no, I didn't know those were yours," she said sweetly, wiping the counter. David just sat there reading the news, pretending he didn't hear. So I started spending less time there. Made excuses. Oh, I've got a doctor's appointment. Or, I think the heater's acting up at home. They didn't care. Not once did David say, "Are you all right, Mom?" He used to when he was little. He used to run his finger across the inside of my palm and ask, "Why do you have lines here?" "Because they tell stories," I'd tell him. He doesn't ask about stories anymore. I went to see Clara again, the lawyer. We set up legal protections. I moved what was left of my savings into a trust. We froze access to any joint assets. And then I did something that surprised even me. I booked an appointment with a forensic accountant Clara recommended. His name was Mr. Linwood, a meticulous, soft-spoken man with glasses too big for his face and a memory like a steel trap. He asked me one question. "Do you suspect your son or daughter-in-law have used your information to access accounts or make purchases?" I hesitated. Then I nodded. We reviewed 3 years of financial history. He pointed to small charges on a credit card I didn't even know was still active. Charges from high-end boutiques, spa days, and once, a $4,200 deposit on a wellness retreat in Napa. That same weekend, I remember Leanne showing off her new bracelet, saying it was a gift from David. She'd never worked a full-time job in her life. I clenched my jaw as Mr. Linwood continued. "These are common signs of financial exploitation in older adults," he said gently. "But the good news is, it leaves a trail." And that trail led back to them. Emails, forwarding addresses, redirected mail. I sat in my little kitchen that night, holding a mug of warm milk, staring at the folder Clara had given me. Inside were printed screenshots, records, authorizations that didn't match my signature. My fingers trembled. Not with age, but with rage. It wasn't just the money. It was the ease with which they took it. As if I wouldn't notice. As if I didn't matter. The betrayal stung. But oddly, what hurt more was the rehearsed indifference. Like I had faded into wallpaper in their lives. Useful only when they needed something. I thought about confronting them right then. Storming into their house. Raising my voice. Demanding apologies. But I stopped myself. No. I would do this right. Let them believe I was naive a little longer. Let them feel comfortable. Entitled. I called Clara and said I was ready. She told me we'd begin drafting a cease and desist, followed by a formal letter notifying David and Leanne of the investigation. "You're protected now, Miriam," she said. "Whatever they plan to take, it stops here." Still, I wasn't done yet. There was one more person I needed to speak to. His name was Reverend Carter. He'd known David since he was a boy. Back when we used to sit side by side in the pews, my son gripping my hand while the hymns played softly. I found him still tending the garden behind the old church, wearing that straw hat of his and humming something familiar. "Miriam," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "It's been too long." We sat on the bench behind the lilac bush, the one where I used to bring David during Sunday school breaks. I didn't cry when I told him everything. I thought I might. But no tears came, only a steady river of words, like they'd been building behind a dam for too long. "I don't know who he is anymore," I said at last. "I gave him everything. And now he treats me like a burden." Reverend Carter sighed. "Sometimes, the people we raise don't become who we hoped. They become who life allowed them to be. And sometimes that life didn't require them to learn kindness." That struck something deep in me. "He was good once," I whispered. "He may still be," he said. "But being good doesn't mean he's not responsible for what he's done. Forgiveness isn't a license for mistreatment." He placed a weathered hand on mine. "You're not alone in this. And you're not weak for saying enough." I drove home that day with a strange sense of peace growing beneath my ribs. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reclaiming my dignity. The letter went out the following week. Clara had couriered it directly to their house, along with a second envelope for David, outlining the terms of the trust and the legal restrictions now placed on my finances. That night, I waited. My phone buzzed around 9:30. David. I didn't answer. Then again. And again. I let it ring. The next day, they showed up at my door. Leanne stood behind him, arms crossed like she was bracing for war. David looked angry. Not guilty. Angry. Mom, he said tightly. What is this? I think it's clear, I said, stepping aside. They walked in without permission. You hired a lawyer? He hissed. I nodded. Yes. You're accusing us of stealing? No. The documents show it plainly. I'm simply responding. He looked like he'd been slapped. Leanne scoffed. You're being paranoid, Miriam. This is insane. You're tearing the family apart. That word again. Paranoid. They thought I was old, tired, confused. I stood tall. I've given you everything, I said. My savings. My time. My trust. And you've spent it like it was owed to you. David stepped forward, his voice low. You're blowing this out of proportion. I handed him the bank statements. The proof. His face paled. I never authorized. The retreat. The bracelet. The redirected mail. My password book that disappeared. Don't lie to me, David. Silence. Then a flicker of something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. But Leanne's expression hardened. So what now? You're cutting us off? No, I said gently. I'm choosing myself. And with that, I walked to the door, opened it, and waited. Slowly, reluctantly, they walked out. Noah stood near the car, watching from the window. I waved. He waved back. For now, that was enough. I sat in my armchair that evening, still in the same clothes I wore when I'd asked them to leave. The house was silent, except for the slow ticking of the grandfather clock, the one David helped me restore when he was 16. Funny how time holds memories like that, even when people don't. Outside, the wind blew softly, brushing the rose bushes that lined my walkway. The same rose bushes I'd tended for years, petals in blush and crimson, blooming faithfully every spring. Unlike people, they didn't forget who watered them. That night, I lit a candle. Not for prayer, not exactly, but for peace. I needed a symbol. Something to mark the line I'd drawn. And something to remind me, I wasn't the one who broke this family. They were. And I would no longer carry the weight of their choices. The next morning, I received a text from David. We need to talk. Without lawyers. Please. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in backdoor explanations or emotional manipulation. I had played that part for too long. The quiet mother, the grateful grandmother, the selfless helper. But silence? Silence was powerful now. Silence was mine. That weekend, I went to brunch with Marlene. We hadn't done that in years. We laughed over scrambled eggs and shared stories of the good old days, which were good mostly because we were still naive enough to believe we were being loved right. You look lighter, Marlene said, sipping her tea. Like a weight's off your chest. I nodded. It is. But it's strange. You'd think finally standing up for yourself would feel like a fight. But it feels like breathing again. She smiled warmly. That's because it's not vengeance. It's freedom. I let that sink in. Because she was right. I hadn't burned any bridges. They did. I simply stopped rebuilding them with my bare hands. But life has a way of testing your peace. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Not the frantic kind. Not angry. Just a soft knock. I opened it to find Noah, alone. I panicked at first. Where's your mom and dad? He looked up at me, eyes a little puffy. They're in the car, he whispered. But I wanted to come see you first. I crouched down. Sweetheart, you can't just run off like that. Your mommy and daddy might worry. He glanced over his shoulder and shook his head. They're not worried. They're yelling. I hugged him tight, swallowing the lump in my throat. He felt smaller somehow. Like the stress in that house had shrunk him. Did they tell you what was going on? I asked gently. He nodded. They said you don't want to be our grandma anymore. My chest cracked open. I pulled him into my lap, rocking him slightly on the porch bench like I used to when he was 3. Noah, I whispered. I will always be your grandma. That will never, ever change. But sometimes, grown-ups have to make hard decisions when other grown-ups don't treat them kindly. Do you understand? He blinked. Like timeouts. I smiled faintly. Something like that, yes. His little hand reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something folded, a crumpled piece of notebook paper. He held it out to me. It's a picture, he said shyly, of the pink house I'm gonna buy you. It even has a flower door. Tears blurred my vision. Not because of the drawing, but because, somehow, this 5-year-old boy had more loyalty in his tiny heart than both his parents combined. We sat like that for a few minutes. Then David finally got out of the car. His walk was stiff. His face unreadable. Mom, he said with a measured voice. Can we talk? I stood slowly, still holding Noah's hand. Not today, David. His eyes narrowed. So this is it? You're just cutting us off? After everything we've done for you? I almost laughed. What you've done for me. I looked him in the eye and said, what you've done is take my trust, my money, my dignity, and twist it into something disposable. Leanne rolled down the window. Miriam, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're family. Family, I said softly, doesn't lie, steal, and gaslight. David looked at Noah. Come on, buddy. Back in the car. Noah hesitated. Go on, I whispered, kissing his forehead. I'll see you soon, all right? He looked at me like he didn't want to go, but he obeyed, because he's still too young to understand that love should never feel like obligation. As they drove away, I clutched the drawing in my hand. That night, I framed it. Hung it right above the mantel. A pink house. With a flower door. A reminder of the purest love I've ever received. In the weeks that followed, I began rebuilding my world. I took a pottery class. Just me and a room full of women named Evelyn, Doris, and May. We laughed a lot. I made a crooked mug that I use now every morning for tea. I rejoined my book club. We read novels about women who leave things, marriages, cities, expectations, and find themselves again somewhere softer. I even started volunteering at the library on Tuesdays, helping children with their reading. It filled something in me that I didn't know had gone empty. My lawyer called a few times. The investigation was still underway. There were documents being processed. She assured me I was safe. But that wasn't what I was thinking about anymore. I was thinking about joy. I was thinking about how nice it felt to reclaim the hours in my day. No more waiting for phone calls that never came. No more sitting at the edge of someone else's life, hoping for crumbs of affection. No more bending backward to earn respect that should have been mine by default. And then one day it happened. The final piece. A letter arrived in my mailbox. No name on the return. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A typed apology. From David. He admitted to accessing my accounts. Blamed Leanne at first, of course. Said she pressured him. Said he didn't know how to say no. But then, a strange line. I think I started resenting you when I realized I couldn't repay you. You were always the one saving me. And I hated needing you. I sat with that line for a long time. It wasn't an excuse. But it was a truth. David had never really become his own man. And somewhere along the way, he decided it was easier to punish me for that than to thank me. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. But I did feel something settle inside me, Like a chapter turning, the final period typed. I folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box with my most precious things. My husband's pocket watch. A seashell Noah once gave me. My mother's recipe for lemon bars. And then I went on with my day. Because that's what healing looks like sometimes. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just ordinary peace. The last time I saw Noah, it was his kindergarten performance. I'd called the school myself. Told them I was family. Asked if I could come. They were kind. Gave me a seat up front. David and Leanne didn't see me at first. But when Noah walked on stage, eyes scanning the crowd, he spotted me. His whole face lit up. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the betrayals. Not the money. Not even David. Noah waved with both hands. I waved back. The world faded around us. I smiled, whispering softly to myself, I'm still here. There are moments in life that don't need photographs to be remembered. Noah's face, beaming from that kindergarten stage, will stay with me longer than any picture frame ever could. His hands waved as if he were reaching for something. And in a way, I think he was. Maybe it wasn't just me he was looking for. Maybe it was stability. Safety. A soft place to land. Because the truth is, children sense more than we think. When the program ended, and parents rushed to gather their little ones, I slipped out the side door quietly. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want Leanne's smug glances or David's performative concern. I just wanted to leave with the sound of Noah's voice still ringing in my heart. A song about butterflies and springtime. But just as I reached the parking lot, I heard small footsteps behind me. Grandma! I turned. Noah came flying at me like a gust of joy, arms flung open, backpack bouncing. You saw me. I did. I laughed, crouching to hug him. You were the best one up there. He leaned in and whispered, I made a wish. That you'd come. Before I could respond, David's voice cut through the moment. Noah! What did I say about running off? He strode toward us, irritation already curling his mouth. I stood and held Noah's hand. He just came to say hello. That's all. David looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, there was no anger, no smugness, just tiredness. Maybe even regret. But I didn't reach for it. I wasn't here to save him anymore. Can we talk, Mom? He asked, quieter this time. I hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. He motioned for Noah to wait in the car, and the little boy obeyed without protest, waving at me from behind the window as he buckled in. David and I stood beneath the shade of a tall oak tree. The air between us held years of unsaid things. I got the final report, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. From Clara. I waited. There's a lot in there. There is, I said. And it's all true. He nodded slowly, eyes on the pavement. I messed up. I said nothing. I think I was angry at you for never needing anyone, he continued. And maybe I started taking things because I thought I deserved something back. I gave you everything, I said softly. Not for repayment. Not for control. Just out of love. But what you took wasn't just money. It was trust. It was safety. His eyes filled and he didn't wipe them. I miss being your son. That door was never closed, I said. You just walked out of it. We stood there in silence, and I saw the boy he used to be flicker behind his tired face. But I also saw a man who had grown used to shortcuts, who had relied on the idea that I would always catch his fall. Not anymore. Are you ever going to forgive me? He asked. I looked toward Noah in the car. I'm working on it, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. It means I no longer carry your guilt on my back. He swallowed hard. That's fair. I hope you do the work, I added. Because the best thing you can do for me now is be a better father than you were a son. He nodded, slowly. I'll try. Don't try, I said gently. Just start. After that conversation, I didn't hear from David or Leanne for nearly 2 months. It wasn't silence out of spite. It was space. And I needed it. I used that time to reclaim corners of my life I had forgotten. I painted my kitchen yellow, like sunlight. I baked bread again, the kind my husband used to love, filling the house with warm smells of rosemary and olive oil. I even rejoined the senior center walking group. We called ourselves the Strollers, and let me tell you, nobody gossips better than 7 retired women in sneakers. But through it all, Noah stayed in touch. Once a week, I'd get a letter, handwritten in the shaky scrawl of a kindergartner. Sometimes with a drawing. Sometimes with a pressed flower. Once a note that said, "I love you more than pancakes." Those letters became my treasure box. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I received a knock. It wasn't David. It was Leanne. I opened the door slowly. She looked humbled. No makeup. Hair in a messy bun. A sleepless look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't move. "What do you want?" She hesitated. "To apologize." I blinked. "I know I haven't been kind," she said, voice faltering. "And I let a lot of things happen that I shouldn't have. But I need you to know. I didn't come from a family that loved like you did. I never knew how to be close to anyone who wasn't transactional." I crossed my arms. "And so you tried to turn me into a transaction?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. And I regret that." A long pause. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added. "I just wanted to say it." I studied her for a moment. She wasn't pretending anymore. This wasn't a performance. But that didn't mean I would open my doors wide again. "Thank you," I said. "But just like you didn't know how to love without strings, I'm learning how to love with boundaries." She nodded. Understood. I didn't invite her in. But as she turned to leave, I offered one sentence. "Be a good mother. Because Noah deserves better than what we gave him." She didn't reply. She just nodded again, and walked away. Months passed. Seasons changed. And one day, I looked around my little house, and realized it felt full again. Not of people, necessarily, but of peace. I'd been invited to Noah's birthday party. At a park. Nothing fancy. Just cupcakes, balloons, and a small gathering of friends. When I arrived, Noah came running at me with open arms, shouting, "Grandma! You came!" I held him tight. Wouldn't miss it for the world. David and Leanne were there. They were polite, reserved, but respectful. They didn't try to corner me or rewrite the past. They simply let me be there, as I was. And that was enough. As Noah opened gifts, laughing and bouncing with joy, I noticed something tucked into his backpack again. Later, when he showed me privately, it was another drawing. A pink house. But this time, he had drawn himself standing beside it. And on the door in big block letters, it read, "Love lives here." I hugged him so tight he squealed. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt whole. I've always believed healing is not a destination. It's a long, winding walk with sore feet, unexpected rain, and little sunlit moments that remind you why you keep going. That birthday party had been one of those moments. Seeing Noah beam with joy while his classmates sang to him. It felt like someone had stitched a tiny patch over the hole in my heart. Not enough to fix it entirely, but enough to hold it together for a while. And the drawing? That pink house with "Love lives here" scrawled on the door? I framed it. It now hangs in my entryway, a daily reminder that sometimes the purest love doesn't come from those who raised you, but from those you've helped raise. That weekend, I sat in my small garden pruning the lavender when a neighbor named Alice wandered over. She's new to the block, probably in her early 60s, recently retired. "I've seen you out here a lot lately," she said, smiling warmly. I guess the roses talk to me better than most people do, I replied with a chuckle. She tilted her head. You always have this peaceful look, like someone who knows who they are. I paused, then smiled. Took me nearly 70 years, but I finally figured it out. We talked for hours that day. About sons and motherhood. About giving too much and learning to keep a little for yourself. About how the hardest part of being a mother isn't the sleepless nights or the scraped knees. It's watching the child you gave everything to turn into someone who doesn't see your value anymore. I wish I could go back and say no more often, Alice whispered once. I nodded. It's not too late to say it now. That conversation stayed with me. Because I realized something. My journey wasn't just about recovering what was taken. It was about reclaiming what I gave away too freely. My voice, my peace, my worth. The legal case wrapped up a few weeks later. Clara called me and said simply, "It's done. Your accounts are safe. The unauthorized transactions have been reversed. They won't be able to access anything going forward." A breath I didn't know I'd been holding escaped my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. "You did this, Miriam," she said. "You stood up. And you changed the ending of your story." When we hung up, I sat with the silence. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was quiet the way a morning is quiet before the sun rises. Full of possibility. I pulled out an old notebook, the one I used to write in when David was little. Letters I never sent. Thoughts I never voiced. Some angry, some sad, some full of hope. And I wrote a new letter. This one wasn't to him. It was to myself. Dear Miriam, you did not fail. You trusted. You gave. You loved. And now you choose you. Not out of bitterness. But because you're worthy of peace. You are not just someone's mother or grandmother. You are someone. Always have been. Always will be. I tore the page out and tucked it beside Noah's drawing. Side by side. Two voices that reminded me who I was. And who I had always been. One evening, I got a knock at my door again. This time, it was David. He held something in his hands. A wooden box. "I found this in our garage," he said. "I think you left it there years ago." He handed it to me gently. I recognized it immediately. It was my keepsake box, the one that used to sit at the top of my closet. I thought it had been lost during their last move. Inside were letters. Polaroids. A lock of David's baby hair tied with blue ribbon. A dried flower from my wedding bouquet. Memories I thought were gone. "Why are you bringing this now?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because I'm trying to do better. And because Noah asked about you last night." He said, "Why doesn't Grandma live with us anymore?" I looked up at him. "What did you tell him?" David swallowed. I told him. Because we didn't treat her right. There it was. No deflection. No excuses. Just truth. "And what did he say?" He said, "Well, let's treat her better then." A soft smile touched my lips. "He has your heart," I said. "Before life taught you how to bury it." He looked at the floor. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "You're right," I said. "But sometimes we offer it anyway. Not for them. For us." I didn't invite him in. But I let him leave the box. And that was enough. That summer I started something new. With Clara's help, I donated part of my recovered money to a community program for senior women. A fund that supports those navigating financial abuse, family betrayal, and legal protections. We named it the Pink House Fund. For every woman who's been told she's too old to start over. For every grandmother who gave everything, and still got left behind. The first meeting was held in my living room. 8 women showed up. By fall, we needed the church hall. We shared stories. We cried. We laughed. We passed around tea and tissues and bravery. And slowly, we stitched each other back together. One of the women, Doreen, once said something I'll never forget. We think aging means losing things: youth, beauty, relevance. But sometimes, aging just means finally learning how to stop apologizing for being the one who always showed up. And I realized, that's exactly what I'd done my whole life. I showed up. For my husband. For my son. For Noah. But now I was showing up for myself. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in careful handwriting. It was from Noah. Dear Grandma, I miss you every day. I put a flower in my lunchbox and say it's from you. Mommy says I can come visit soon if I behave. I made a new pink house picture. This one has 2 chairs on the porch. One for you. One for me. Love, your Noah. Tears slid down my cheeks. Not out of sadness. Out of joy. Because no matter what came next, that boy loved me. And that love was mine. Real. Unshakable. And earned. The day Noah came to visit me again was bright and full of the kind of sunlight that warms more than just your skin. It felt like life had opened its hands and said, "Here, take a moment of goodness. You've earned it." He ran through my garden gate with that familiar burst of energy, arms stretched out like wings, cheeks pink from the breeze. "Grandma," he yelled. "I'm here." I didn't even get the chance to stand before he was in my lap, hugging me so tightly I thought my heart might burst. Mommy said I could stay for the whole day. She packed me snacks and everything. I looked up and saw Leanne by the car, watching. Her expression was unreadable, but she nodded once before driving off. No drama. No demands. Just trust. It was a strange feeling coming from her, but I didn't question it. Not today. Today was Noah's. We made pancakes shaped like hearts and stars. He insisted on stirring the batter even though half of it ended up on the counter and his face. We read 3 books under a blanket on the couch. We danced in the garden when the sprinkler came on by mistake. And when the afternoon sun softened into golden light, we sat on the back steps, our feet bare in the grass, sharing a bowl of strawberries. He reached into his little backpack and pulled out a folded paper. My breath caught. Another drawing. This one had the pink house again, but this time with 4 figures. One was clearly me. I had gray hair and a flower in my hand. One was Noah. He'd drawn a cape on himself this time. And beside us, David and Leanne. Smaller, slightly to the side, but still there. "There's room," he said softly. "For all of us. If we try." I stared at it, my throat tightening. Children don't carry grudges. They carry hope. I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. There's room. But everyone has to build their own porch steps." He giggled, not quite understanding, and leaned his head against my arm. "Grandma," he said quietly, "are you gonna go away again?" That question broke something inside me. "No," I said, kissing the top of his head. "I'm always here. Even if I'm not in your house, I'm in your heart. And you? You'll always be in mine." After Noah left, the house felt full instead of empty. That's how I knew I'd healed. Before, silence was a punishment. An echo of what was missing. Now, silence felt like company. A friend who sat beside me, peaceful and still. I spent my evenings crocheting little blankets for the shelter. I baked on Sundays and brought the extra to the community center. I walked every morning and stopped to talk to people I used to pass by. Life had become small, but not lonely. It was intentional. Curated. Mine. And then, unexpectedly, David called. Not to argue. Not to beg. Just to talk. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice softer than I remembered. "Noah talks about you every day." I talk to him every night when I look at the drawing on my wall. He chuckled faintly. He really believes he's going to buy you a pink house one day. "He already did," I said. In my heart. There was a long pause. I want to apologize again, he said. Not just for what we did, but for what we didn't do. For not showing up. For treating you like a wallet instead of a mother. I stayed silent. Let him say the rest. I started seeing a therapist, he added. I've got a lot of stuff to unpack. Stuff I thought I'd buried. That's good, David. Truly. I know I can't erase anything, he said. But I hope, someday, you'll let us earn our way back in. I exhaled. A part of me had longed to hear those words for years. But I'd learned, finally, not to live in longing. You don't need to earn your way back, David, I said. But you do need to earn your way forward. He was quiet. Keep being a better father, I said. The rest will come. Later that week, I visited the church garden with Marlene. We sat under the lilacs, sipping lemonade, the scent of the flowers dancing in the breeze. She turned to me suddenly and said, "You look like a woman who finally chose herself." I smiled. Maybe I am. You know, she continued, when you told me what they did, I thought you'd spend the rest of your life waiting for them to apologize. But you didn't. You got up. You built a new story. I nodded. I had to. The one they were writing for me was killing me slowly. She reached into her bag and handed me a tiny pin, shaped like a house, with pink enamel and a golden heart. I had this made, she said, for the women in our group. I stared at it, speechless. It's for the ones who rebuilt their own homes, even if only in spirit. I pinned it to my cardigan and whispered, "Thank you." Months passed. Winter arrived with its soft hush. I decorated the mantel with lights and garlands. The Pink House group continued to grow, women from all walks of life, gathering not to share sadness, but survival. And then, one snowy afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it and gasped. David. Leanne. Noah. And in David's hands, a small potted rosebush. "Peace rose," he said. "We planted one in our yard. This one's for yours." My throat tightened. Leanne stepped forward. "We'd like to have you for dinner. Just dinner. No expectations." I looked down at Noah, bundled in a red scarf. "Please, Grandma," he whispered. And for once, I didn't feel afraid of being used. I felt seen. Not because they'd suddenly become perfect, but because I had changed. I was no longer someone they could manipulate. I had boundaries now. Voice now. A name that couldn't be erased. "I'll come," I said. "But I'm bringing dessert." Noah cheered. Leanne smiled. David's eyes glistened. As they turned to leave, Noah ran back and pressed something into my hand. A tiny key. "It's for your pink house," he whispered. "In case you ever want to visit." I held it tight, heart full. Because now I understood. The pink house was never about the paint or the porch. It was about me. It was the home I built inside myself. Unshakable. Rooted. And finally, mine. There was a time I thought strength looked like silence. Like enduring quietly. Like swallowing the hard parts. Like smiling through betrayals just to keep the peace. But peace built on my erasure was never peace at all. That lesson took me decades. It took David's silence, Leanne's entitlement, and the whisper of a 5-year-old boy warning me in the dark, for me to finally understand that strength isn't suffering in silence. It's choosing yourself. Even when it means letting go of the people you once gave everything to. Dinner at their home came 2 weeks after that snowy doorstep moment. I stood outside their house, the same one I helped pay for, feeling a mixture of warmth and caution. The porch light was on. The walkway was shoveled. In the window, I could see Noah bouncing around in his socks. I rang the bell and braced myself. Leanne opened the door. She was wearing an apron, not a designer one, not made to impress, just simple and cotton, splattered with sauce. "Miriam," she said softly. "You look beautiful." I smiled, surprised to realize I believed her. "Thank you," I replied. "I brought lemon bars." Her eyes lit up. David told me they were his favorite growing up. I stepped inside slowly. And something was different. The house felt warmer. Not in temperature, in tone. There was no tension. No sidelong glances. No silent dismissals. Just a table set for 4, candles glowing gently, Noah's drawings hanging proudly on the fridge. David came out of the kitchen drying his hands on a towel. "Hey, Mom." "Hello, David." We stood facing each other. Not as adversaries this time. Not even as family necessarily. But as two people choosing to try again. With new rules. Dinner was simple. Spaghetti, garlic bread, a green salad. Leanne told me they'd started cooking together on weekends. That they were going to therapy. That they'd even started volunteering at Noah's school. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to forgive or praise. I just witnessed. And when Noah said, "I'm glad we're all together," I reached over and held his hand. "I'm glad too, sweetheart." After dinner, while Leanne cleaned up, David asked if we could talk privately. We sat on the back porch, where frost clung to the railings and our breath came in visible puffs. "I wanted to give you something," he said, reaching into his coat. He handed me a thick envelope. I opened it. Inside was a signed notarized document, transferring the full value of what I'd given them for the house, plus interest, into a trust in my name. Untouchable. Secure. "It's not enough," David said quickly. "But it's a start." I stared at it, then looked at him. "It's not the money that matters most," I said. "It's that you finally understand it was never yours to take." He nodded. "I do. And Noah?" I asked. He smiled, more genuine than I'd seen in years. "He's teaching me more than I ever taught him." I folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. "Then maybe," I said, "we're both getting something back." Life didn't become perfect after that night. It wasn't some storybook ending where all the wrongs were righted and everyone held hands forever. There were still awkward moments. Still space between us. But what mattered was that the old story, the one where I was small, used, forgotten, had ended. And I was writing something new. Something bolder. One day in March, I was at the Pink House Fund meeting when a woman named Evelyn shared her story. She was 74. Widowed. Her son had forged her signature to take out loans. She had nothing left but shame. "I thought being a mother meant giving everything," she said. "But now I realize I have nothing left to give. Not even to myself." I held her hand across the circle. "You do," I said. "You have your voice. You have your worth. You have us." That day I decided something. It was time to go further. With Clara's help, we expanded the Pink House Fund into a formal nonprofit, complete with legal counseling, housing aid, and education sessions about financial safety for seniors. We partnered with shelters, churches, clinics. And one by one, women came. Not broken, but breaking free. Some shared their stories anonymously. Others brought pictures of grandkids they hadn't seen in years. A few had tears in their eyes when they walked in, and light in their eyes when they left. We weren't just healing. We were building. And one afternoon, as I walked into the community center and saw a painted mural going up on the wall, a wide pink house with open doors and hearts blooming like roses, I felt the most overwhelming sense of peace. This was my legacy. Not the money I gave. Not the house I paid for. But the space I created when I finally stood up. And then came the letter. Written in blue crayon, sealed with tape, folded like origami. From Noah. "Dear Grandma, Daddy said you help people now. That you save ladies who are scared. I told my class you're a hero. I drew you with a cape. Can you come to school and read a story? My teacher said yes. I want you to bring the lemon bars too. Love. Noah. P.S. I added a tree next to the pink house. You can sit under it when you get tired. I read it 3 times. Then cried. Then baked lemon bars. Because healing isn't just about moving on. It's about returning to the places that once broke you, and walking in, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to stay down. I went to Noah's class that Friday. Wore my best floral blouse. Brought 2 trays of lemon bars. And as I read, The Giving Tree, aloud to a circle of 6-year-olds, my grandson leaned against me and whispered, "You don't give too much anymore, right, Grandma?" I looked at him, at his little face so full of wisdom. And I whispered back, "No, sweetheart. I've learned to give just enough, and keep the rest safe inside." He nodded like that made perfect sense. And I knew, deep down, he'd carry that truth with him. Because that's what this all was now. Not revenge. Not bitterness. But legacy. The kind built on boundaries, love, and a pink house where peace lives. And for the first time in my long winding life, I was finally home. I always thought my story would end in a quiet way. A rocking chair, some knitting, maybe a soft radio humming in the background while I watched the seasons pass. That's what we're taught to expect in old age. But peace doesn't come from stillness. Not real peace. Not the kind you have to fight for. It comes from choosing yourself, when no one else will. From standing up, even when your knees shake. From rebuilding something sacred, not with wood and nails, but with truth and boundaries. That's the kind of peace I found in the last chapter of my life. And it started with a whisper. It had been almost a year since that night Noah warned me in hushed tones about the money. A year since I began peeling away the layers of betrayal, reclaiming my independence, and planting the roots of something new. Not just for myself, but for women like me. I was no longer just a grandmother, or a mother. I was a builder of homes made of resilience. A protector of peace. A survivor turned leader. The Pink House Fund had grown. We'd helped over 300 women file protective orders, recover stolen finances, and, maybe most importantly, find the courage to speak up after years of silence. One of them, Agnes, once said to me, "I thought I was too old to start over. But turns out, I was just getting started." Her words echoed inside me every day. And yet, amid all the strength, I still carried softness. I still kept a drawer filled with Noah's drawings. Still wrote journal entries addressed to Dear Self. Still planted new roses for every woman who came to our meetings and said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Each one bloomed. Just like we did. Then one spring afternoon, I received a phone call. From David. "Mom," he said carefully, "we'd like to have a family picnic. At the park. Just us. Would you come?" I hesitated. But my heart had softened, not broken. "Yes," I said. "I will." When I arrived, I saw them already laying out a blanket. Leanne was laughing as Noah chased bubbles. David was grilling, wearing an apron that said, #OneDad. That would have made me laugh a year ago. Bitterly. Now, I simply took it in. They weren't perfect. But they were trying. "Grandma!" Noah shouted, running up to me. "Guess what? I'm in charge of lemonade." He pulled me over to a small cooler. Inside were little bottles, each labeled in his handwriting. "Love Ode," I read aloud. He grinned. "Because you always give love." I chuckled. "Well, I try to." We sat under a big oak tree, eating sandwiches, talking about school, the garden, the fundraiser we were hosting next month. David even asked questions about the nonprofit. Listened with genuine interest. At one point, Leanne said quietly, "You've become someone powerful, Miriam." I looked at her and said, "I always was. I just forgot for a while." She nodded, eyes shiny. "Thank you for reminding me too." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie climax. Just a moment, real and simple. But it felt like everything had come full circle. The girl who once saw me as a threat, now saw me as an example. The son who once used me as a safety net, now walked beside me with humility. The boy who whispered the warning that changed everything. now sat beside me drawing flowers on the back of a napkin, humming to himself, peaceful and safe. I excused myself for a moment and walked to the edge of the park, where the wind stirred the cherry blossoms into pink confetti. I closed my eyes, and I thought of the woman I had been a year ago. Lonely, confused, afraid to admit the truth. I thought of the moment I checked my drawer and realized they had taken more than paper. They'd taken my trust. And I thought of that first call to the bank. The first meeting with Clara. The first time I said, "Enough." Then I opened my eyes. And smiled. Because I hadn't just survived betrayal. I had turned it into the blueprint for a new life. A few weeks later, I stood at the podium of a women's conference downtown. Over 100 faces stared up at me. Some young, some older, all of them eager to hear something real. I wore my pink enamel pin, the one shaped like a house. And I began. My name is Miriam Rose. I'm 69 years old. A mother. A grandmother. And until last year, I thought my story was over. That the pages left in my book would be filled only with other people's needs, not mine. But then, my 5-year-old grandson whispered something that changed everything. "My parents are taking your money tonight." And I knew. If I stayed quiet again, I would lose myself completely. The room was silent. I continued. But I didn't stay quiet. I chose to act. I chose to protect the little bit of myself I had left. And from that small act, grew something bigger than I ever imagined. I tell you this because many of you think your story is already written. I'm here to tell you it's not. Your voice still matters. Your boundaries still matter. And it's never too late to build your own pink house, whatever that means for you. A standing ovation followed. But more than that, women came up after, hugged me, shared their truths, asked how to start. And I told each of them the same thing. You start by remembering that you were never meant to live in someone else's shadow. That night, I returned home, kicked off my shoes, made tea, sat by the window and watched the porch light flicker on. I pulled Noah's latest drawing from my bag. This time, the house was 2 stories tall. Inside, stick figures were scattered throughout. One reading, one baking, one planting a tree, and a note scribbled across the roof in purple crayon. "This house is full of love because Grandma built it." I smiled, tears welling. Because in the end, that's the legacy. Not what was taken, but what I gave to myself, when I finally stopped giving to everyone else first. So now when women ask me, "Miriam, how do you start again after so much pain?" I say this. You don't start big. You start quietly. With a whisper. With a locked drawer. With one protected truth. And then you build. Not a castle. Not a mansion. Just a house. A small pink one. With doors that open for love, and lock for betrayal. That's what I did. And I've never looked back.